Imagine you're on a routine morning flight. After a long wait, the aircraft finally lines up on the runway. The engines roar. You're pressed back into your seat. The nose lifts, but the aircraft doesn't climb. Heavy thuds shake the cabin as the tail scrapes the runway. The engines surge. For a few seconds, no one understands what's happening. This is the story of Delta Flight 1141, an accident that never had to happen. It was just after 8:00 a.m. on August 31, 1988, at Dallas, Fort Worth Airport. A Delta Airlines Boeing 727 was preparing to depart for Salt Lake City. On board were 101 passengers and 4 cabin crew. Some were returning from holidays. Others were traveling for business. The 14-year-old aircraft appeared serviceable, aside from an inoperative fuel gauge. In the cockpit were 3 experienced pilots. Captain Larry Davis had over 17,000 flight hours, including 7,000 on the 727. He was the pilot flying. First Officer Wilson Kirkland had 6,500 hours, 4,000 on the same aircraft. Flight Engineer Stephen Judd had 3,000 hours and had joined Delta 7 months earlier. They were well rested. The weather was clear. It should have been routine. Just before 8:00 a.m., the aircraft pushed back from the gate. As the engines were started, the crew began talking about paychecks. This violated the sterile cockpit rule, which requires all conversation during taxi, takeoff, and landing to relate strictly to the flight. Taxi clearance came. It was a busy morning, and they expected a long wait. During taxi, the captain shut down one engine to save fuel. Standard practice. The checklist began. Airspeeds were set, altimeters checked, stabilizer confirmed. Then a flight attendant entered the cockpit to ask about delays. The conversation drifted to food, personal topics, and politics. It continued for nearly 10 minutes. At one point, the first officer joked about giving investigators something interesting to hear if the cockpit recorder were ever recovered after a crash. Eventually, the captain realized they had forgotten to switch radio frequencies. The first officer corrected it. As they neared the runway, the flight engineer made the cabin announcement and prompted departure preparations. The third engine was restarted. The taxi checklist resumed late. They believed they still had several minutes before takeoff. Then Tower cleared them to line up immediately. The relaxed atmosphere disappeared. Instead of requesting more time, they accepted the clearance and rushed through the remaining items. Harnesses on. Flaps 15 degrees. Flight controls checked. But the flaps were never extended. The first officer responded from memory instead of confirming visually. Recent procedural changes had removed a clear moment for flap extension, and responsibility was not clearly defined. In the rush, it was missed. They also confirmed the takeoff briefing as complete, though it had not been conducted during taxi. At 8:59 a.m., Delta Flight 1141 was cleared for takeoff. Flaps increase wing surface and curvature, allowing an aircraft to generate lift at lower speeds. Without them, the aircraft must accelerate much faster to leave the ground. As the throttles advanced, a safety system called the takeoff warning system should have sounded if the aircraft was not properly configured. It did not. The jet accelerated normally. 80 knots. Power set. During the takeoff roll, the flight engineer noticed that the automatic air conditioning cutoff system had not armed, unusual, but not critical. He dismissed it. At rotation speed, the captain pulled back. The nose lifted. The aircraft did not climb. Airspeed continued building. Finally, at 158 knots, the jet lifted off barely. The tail struck the runway, sending sparks behind the aircraft. Stick shakers activated, warning of an approaching stall. The right wing dropped, and briefly struck the runway before correction. Believing an engine problem was responsible, the crew focused on thrust. The engines were operating normally. The real issue was that the flaps were still retracted. Instead of lowering the nose to gain speed, the captain held it high. The aircraft remained just above the ground, unstable and losing energy. Ahead were antenna structures beyond the runway. There was no runway left. 24 seconds after liftoff, the right wing struck an ILS antenna, rupturing a fuel tank. The aircraft rolled to the right and crashed, breaking apart. All 108 people survived the initial impact. However, a post-crash fire claimed 14 lives, 12 passengers and 2 cabin crew. Investigators quickly determined that the flaps had not been set for takeoff. They also discovered corrosion in electrical components of the takeoff warning system. It worked intermittently, explaining why no alarm sounded. The Federal Aviation Administration ordered inspections of nearly 1,200 Boeing 727 aircraft. Dozens of issues were found. The agency recommended redesigning the warning system to sense actual engine power rather than throttle position, along with more frequent inspections. But mechanical failure was only part of the cause. The deeper issue was human factors: distraction, relaxed cockpit discipline, unclear task delegation, incomplete checklists. After the accident, enforcement of sterile cockpit procedures became stricter. Crew resource management training was strengthened. Task responsibilities were clarified. Distraction risks were emphasized. Technology also advanced. On modern aircraft, electronic checklists prevent items from being marked complete unless systems are properly configured. The legacy of Delta Flight 1141 is not only about flaps or warning systems. It is about how small distractions, unclear responsibility, and rushed decisions can align, even on a clear morning with an experienced crew. A routine departure. A simple configuration error. A chain of preventable events.